Have you noticed how your partner is highly sensitive to criticism? Maybe in the moment he like blows up, maybe the moment he gets frustrated, maybe later kind of circles back around and you can just feel it. You can feel the upsettedness of like, hey, how he's attacking you. Of like, what is this from? Oh, yeah, it's because I called him out on something. I actually like opened up and said, hey, this is what I want you to work on. Maybe you're wondering, why do they react so strongly to feedback? Or you just gave a suggestion, but they lashed out like it was the end of the world. They lashed out like you were getting ready to, do something really dangerous to them of like, oh, how could you even do this? So I want you to join me today as we dive into the world of just sensitive narcissists and explore like effective ways to be able to understand this and to be able to help process it as well. Okay. So as we dive in, first and foremost, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, rate, review, share this with someone. If you're new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist to help people understand narcissistic abuse, how it destroys relationships, destroys lives, and how to set you free. We focus on this inside the Clarity Challenge. You can go to claritychallenge.net to be able to learn more. If you want to talk to me one-on-one, go to rawmotivations.com. Would love to help you out there. So when we talk through narcissists and criticism, a lot of narcissists respond to criticism very negatively. Like they respond very negatively in a way that you bring something up and it's game over. Like all hell breaks loose. Like they attack you, they get upset at you, they belittle you, they give you the silent treatment, all these things. You see this oftentimes. Now, you also have narcissists that seem very, very confident. You give criticism, they just kind of brush it off, but they're still highly sensitive inside. Typically, that's what we always see. Okay, even if they're under this guise of appearing confident on the outside, there's still this piece of being very sensitive to any form of criticism, because criticism, advice, ideas, thoughts, suggestions, all of those, wrap them up together, are considered an attack. An attack on the self-image. So when a narcissist feels you coming at them with the criticism, suggestions, ideas, thoughts, feelings, they're like, ooh, they're getting ready to attack me. I need to defend myself and I need to attack them back. Now, am I saying you should feel sorry for the narcissist? No, we're not on a pity train, okay? What we're on is trying to help you understand of what's actually happening. To the sensitive narcissist, they're going to look at everything you do as perceived attack on their self-image. Because that self-image is fake. That self-image is something that they put up there and projected, and they're going to try to keep it looking a certain way so they can feel good about themselves. When you bring up something that's like, oh, there's a chink in your armor, there's a problem that's glaring right there, they're going to try to run away from it. And they're going to try to attack you. So why are they sensitive? Well, narcissists are sensitive because of the fragile self-esteem. You're like, fragile self-esteem, they seem super confident. They seem that way, but it is part of the mask. It is part of the illusion that the narcissist is putting out there that I actually, I'm confident. I look this great. I'm this amazing. All it is propping up a fragile self-ego. There's an underlying fear a lot of times for narcissists of being exposed. This is where shame comes into play. Because shame is actually forcing and saying, oh, you don't not just did something bad, but you actually are a bad person. Narcissist is like, I can't be a bad person. Therefore, I'm not a bad person. Mask goes up. And trying to get away from this underlying fear of being exposed as inadequate or being exposed as flawed. Like, oh, there's some pieces wrong with me. Yeah, I've been believing for years there's nothing wrong with me. So why would I want to actually approach that? Why would I actually want people to see that? But criticism comes in and it starts to threaten. And threatens their carefully crafted facade of perfection, triggering feelings of shame and unworthiness. This is something that I still struggle with. I'm not fixed in this regard, okay? Like I'm still struggling with things, which is why I wake up early, which is why I stack, which is why I do like my core 4, which is why I focus on how I'm developing every single day. Because we'll have something, we'll have an interaction with my daughter and I'll want to respond a certain way. And my wife will say something, even in the most loving way possible, of like, hey, that's probably not the best way to do it. And I'll want to just rage out. And do I? Most of the times, no. But I want to do that because in my mind, it feels like, I just got attacked because I just got exposed as something I was doing wrong. I was doing something wrong, so therefore I am wrong, therefore I am bad, therefore breaks down the mask, all these things. Still, this is after multiple years of therapy, this is after thousands of stacks that I've done, trying to help my mindset, it still is a trigger. Because shame is so much there, shame is so much underneath the surface that it gets triggered all the time. But oftentimes when you're with a narcissist, it'll get triggered and then they'll lash back out. Now, you might get to the place where you're like, I'll work on this. We'll figure this out. So you talk to your partner, you're like, hey, I think we need to work on our communication. Like, here's a couple things I think you could improve. And in one sense, they might look at it and start to interpret of like, oh, you're pointing out evidence that I'm not as perfect as I think I am. So therefore, going to be defensive. Therefore, I'm going to throw it back on you. Well, you're not very good at communication. Like, have you heard yourself speak? Like, I can't believe it. You actually think you can talk to me about communication? Okay, fine. We both have a problem. So, like, we're both toxic in our communication. We both have to work on this. So I get it. Like, you're struggling with it. I'm struggling with it. Yeah, we can work on this. Why don't you go to therapy? I'm good because, I'm actually not struggling with it at all, but I'm just making you believe that I am. Like, there's all this back and forth. Okay? Now, I'm, like, joking with part of it because, like, I want you to try to see both sides at the same time. Because the whole aspect is like, oh, you might have evidence that breaks down my perfect frame, that breaks down the image of me. This is the piece that's really hard. So narcissist tries to run away from it. And you're like, okay, well, how do I handle this? You're like, maybe I could be more loving. And maybe I could communicate in a different way. Maybe I could approach in this aspect, then they wouldn't respond this way. Hard part is, the majority of times, doesn't matter how you approach it. Yes, it could be bigger or lower responses, but the end result is about the same. As a narcissist is going to get triggered about shame no matter what, because it's still prevalent in their lives and they're unwilling to actually acknowledge it, to work through it, or be honest. Think of in this situation, like you might be at the place where you're just like, you never listen to me, you're so self-centered, I can't believe you're an asshole, all these things. You can try a different approach of like, hey, sometimes I just feel unheard. Like, it means a lot to me if we could work on our communication. That might do something different, but oftentimes it is not going to do a completely 180 response. It is still going to have oftentimes the same response long term because of that person's inability or unwillingness to actually be honest with themselves. This is the aspect of no matter what you bring up. Like, you could bring up like the smallest thing to the largest thing and they'll still respond the same way. Or they'll still get to the place where they'll respond the same way over a couple days. Because it still attacks them. It still is in their mindset an attack. And until they actually take the time to stop, work on the story they believe of like, oh, my wife isn't attacking me when she's trying to give me advice. Mind-blowing. For some of you, like, well, duh, I'm not attacking them. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that's how they interpret it. Okay? But until the narcissists are willing to change that thought process, they're always going to view it that way. So this is why like people are like, well, maybe if I'm just more loving, it'll work. I'm like, if he's unwilling to be honest about what's actually going on, you being more loving is just going to enable him. Like, it's not going to change anything. Because you think that you have a power over this other person. You think that you can enforce change on this other person. You think that you can manufacture that by how you show up different when it doesn't have anything to do with you. You can walk up to him and say, I love you. And you can walk up to him and slap him in the face and say, I hate you. And guess what? Oftentimes you could get sometimes the same response long term because it's still about them. It's still about what they want. It's still about the mask that they have to be able to keep. Like, you have to be able to understand a lot of times narcissists are very, very sensitive to criticism. And you have to be able to be prepared for the response that you're going to get when you say and hold them accountable. When you hold them responsible for the things they've done, when you hold them accountable for the things that they've said, when you do this, a lot of times they will bring out the sensitivity bucket and just dump it on you because they're like, what? Can't believe you just said that. They'll call you sensitive. They'll call you oversensitive. They'll call all these kind of things. Try to switch it around. This is where you have to stay strong and you have to set healthy boundaries for you. Of like, I said what I said. Your response is your response. I didn't say it meanly, and I didn't say it out of hate for you. I said it out of love and care for our relationship. If this is how you want to respond to it, you can respond that way, but it's not going to be around me because you're unwilling to even acknowledge my viewpoint. You see the difference? You're not limiting, you're not controlling, you're not telling what they can or cannot do. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And in order for this relationship to work, in order for us to grow together, this is something that I'm not willing to compromise on, that I'm not willing to have in the relationship. So if you want this relationship to work, here's the things that I'm actually saying that I need for me. Not for him to do, but for you. Establishing clear boundaries of how you expect to be treated in the relationship. Communicating that respectful, open, constructive conversations are necessary for both people to grow. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. Like, you have to understand that, like, even though the criticism is going to be tough for a narcissist to hear, it's essential to be able to work through that, to build a stronger relationship, if that's even on the possibility on the table. It can't be unless that person is willing to be honest. If they're not willing to be honest, nothing is going to change. Unless the narcissist is honest with you, nothing is going to change, and you're not in a relationship. You're like, what do you mean we're not in a relationship? Because you don't know who you're with. Many of you didn't realize that you were with a fake person until years later, years down the road. What you need to understand is when you don't know who you're with, you don't really have true love. You don't really have this full connection. If anything, it's an infatuation. It's this idea of like, wow, this is amazing, but you don't actually know who they are. So this is the piece that you're going to see over and over of a narcissist being sensitive to criticism. And it's going to be extremely challenging for you to figure out how to be able to work through this. But as you set healthy boundaries for you, as you move forward in this process to eradicate the triggers that are in your life, this is where you're able to stand in power. You're able to say, hey, this is what it is. How you respond is how you respond. But this is what I'm doing. This is the direction I'm going. This is how I'm living. If you want help with this, with dealing with the triggers, with not responding the way he's making you respond, all these different things, go to claritychallenge.net. I want you to go to claritychallenge.net and watch a couple of the videos on that page, just of other survivors that have gone through the challenges. I want you to hear from them, to hear what they've said, to hear what they've gone through, and to show, hey, this stuff has actually been huge and influential in their lives. It can do the same for you. That's if you're willing to accept it. And go to claritychallenge.net today to sign up for the 45-day Clarity Challenge and start to get free, whether you're in or whether you're out of the relationship, start to get free mentally so you can stand up in power of who you're called to be.